Hidden beneath the Arctic and the Pacific, Russian nuclear submarines, carrying weapons powerful enough to destroy entire cities, are being presented by Moscow as ready if the Kremlin ever gives the order. That is how Moscow wants the statement to land. Coming from one of Vladimir Putin's most powerful security officials, who says Russia's sea-based nuclear forces are at full combat readiness, prepared for conflict in any ocean, under any scenario. Kremlin aide Nikolai Patrushev issued the declaration in an interview with Russian state news agency RIA Novosti, presenting Moscow's submarine fleet as the ultimate guarantee that no enemy could ever eliminate Russia's ability to retaliate. And the timing makes the statement read like a message to Ukraine, NATO, and the United States, as Kyiv intensifies attacks on Russian vessels in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, and NATO strengthens its military planning across the waters bordering Russia. At the center of the strategy, Patrushev described are Russia's ballistic missile submarines, the most difficult-to-detect component of its nuclear triad. These vessels are built to disappear beneath the ocean for months at a time, carrying intercontinental missiles armed with multiple nuclear warheads. And their mission is widely misunderstood. It is not to launch a first attack, it is to survive one, and then deliver overwhelming retaliation. That capability, known as a secure second strike, is the cold logic at the heart of deterrence. As long as those submarines cannot be found, no adversary can ever calculate that a surprise attack on Russia would go unanswered. Patrushev said the Russian Navy can guarantee national security across every maritime theater, from Russia's own coastline to the most distant regions of what he called the global ocean. And Moscow had already staged the hardware behind that message. The warning comes roughly 2 months after Russia conducted one of its largest nuclear exercises in recent memory. The 3-day drills in May involved around 64,000 troops, more than 200 missile launchers, over 140 aircraft, 73 surface warships, and 13 submarines, 8 of them reportedly carrying strategic missiles. Russia's northern and Pacific fleets operated in coordination across 2 widely separated oceans. Putin has described nuclear use as an extreme and exceptional measure, but Russia's updated doctrine, as Moscow describes it, gives the Kremlin broader circumstances under which nuclear weapons could be considered, including certain conventional attacks supported by a nuclear-armed power. Patrushev did not threaten a launch, and named no specific adversary. He didn't need to. The purpose is to convince every potential opponent of one thing: no attack can remove Russia's ability to respond. Then came another warning carried by Russian state media, and this one had an address on it. In comments carried by Russian state media, the foreign ministry said Moscow reserved the right to answer threats using all available forces and means, promising consequences that would be, in its words, decisive and devastating for the instigators. The statement was framed by Russian state media as a response to NATO's latest commitments to increase military assistance for Ukraine, which Moscow says is further escalating the conflict and raising security risks across Europe. The ministry did not spell out what all available forces and means would include. It didn't have to. The wording mirrors Russian strategic doctrine, which allows the use of the country's full military capabilities if the state faces what it considers an existential threat. Moscow also repeated its own position since the war began, that Western weapons flowing to Ukraine effectively make NATO countries participants in the conflict. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has repeatedly stated that any shipment carrying military equipment for Ukraine becomes a legitimate military target once identified, and Russia has regularly said its strikes on Ukrainian logistics hubs, rail networks, warehouses, and military industrial facilities were aimed at weapons flows. Yet the flow is accelerating, not slowing. At the recent NATO summit, leaders reaffirmed their commitment to sustaining assistance for Kyiv, with NATO pledging major military equipment, training, and support. Western governments reject Moscow's framing, insisting the aid helps Ukraine defend itself under international law. 2 positions, 0 overlap, and a supply line that keeps growing between them. And now, a bombshell Reuters report says Putin is rejecting the peace path currently on the table. Sources familiar with Kremlin thinking say Putin has no intention of backing down, that he remains determined to seize the remaining parts of Ukraine's eastern Donbass region, and that he recently rejected suggestions from his own advisors to accept a ceasefire based on current front lines. The report says Ukraine's drone attacks on Russian oil refineries, ports, and energy facilities have only strengthened his resolve, with one source describing a high probability that Russia could escalate the conflict in the coming months. If those sources are right, the war is not winding down. It is winding up. More alarming still is where some Russian hardline voices say that escalation could go. According to regional media reports, former Defense Ministry official Andrei Ilnitsky floated a scenario in which Russia could hit major Ukrainian industrial sites before even discussing NATO-linked facilities in the Baltic states and Romania. Military analysts warn that any strike on NATO territory could trigger a direct confrontation with the alliance under Article 5. Some experts believe Moscow may instead seek limited actions designed to test NATO's unity without provoking full-scale war. But notice the signal. Even talk of alliance soil is now being pushed by hardline Russian voices, by name. Against all of this stands one man insisting a deal is near. President Donald Trump claimed peace between Russia and Ukraine is closer than people realize after separate conversations with Putin and Ukrainian President Zelensky. Trump admitted this was not the easy war he expected to settle, calling Putin a difficult character, but pointed to what he described as real progress in recent weeks. The Kremlin's answer captured the contradiction of the moment. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov says Moscow remains open to peace, but also insists it can keep fighting until its goals are achieved.
This is an event that is generating a great deal of interest, including our own interest. We will, of course, be following all the news and all the information that will be coming from Ankara. In the context of preparations for this summit, we have heard many statements that concerned our country. Unfortunately, these were not statements about constructive interaction and dialogue, but rather statements of a confrontational nature. Well, we shall see. We will see what documents this all results in, what statements will be made, what papers will be signed, and what will be said at these bilateral meetings that will take place on the sidelines. Ukraine is constantly requesting new types of weapons, both defensive and offensive. This cannot in any way prevent the continuation of the special military operation until its goals are achieved. At the same time, as always, I would like to reiterate that for us, a political and diplomatic settlement of this conflict remains the preference, and only in the absence of the Kyiv regime's readiness to engage in a peaceful settlement does the special military operation continue until our goals are fully achieved. You know that we maintain contacts through working channels with the Americans, and we hope that their efforts to bring the entire situation onto a peaceful track of development will eventually be crowned with success. At the very least, we, as the President of Russia has repeatedly said, remain open to this. For now, the liberation of Russian regions continues, the liberation of the Donetsk People's Republic. You know that with the taking of Konstantinovka, a very important step was made in both tactical and strategic terms. Besides that, the work of our armed forces to create a security zone or a buffer zone continues. This work will continue. Everything could follow a peaceful path at the moment when the Kyiv regime shows goodwill and shows a readiness to take those important decisions that must be taken.
The situation on the peninsula in Sevastopol remains complex. Sergei Valerievich and I are constantly reporting to you. You are aware of all the difficulties. I will not dwell on them in detail. Now, thanks to the colossal efforts of the transport complex, as Andrei Sergeyevich said, with the participation of the military, logistics are being ensured and supplies are increasing. Nevertheless, it has not yet reached a normal level, of course. And, for example, Sevastopol currently receives on average only 1/3 of the city's daily needs, Of course, as Alexander Valentinovich said, we primarily supply essential services, and when some volumes accumulate, we then release fuel for limited sale to the public. But that is not even the main problem right now. Vladimir Vladimirovich, you are aware of it as well. Unfortunately, it so happened that there were no gas stations owned by vertically integrated companies on the peninsula. Only large private traders operate there, and due to logistics difficulties as well as issues related to exchange purchases, the price on the peninsula has now more than doubled.
For example, in Paraplaki, Tunpurset in Kilpi, the most popular 95-octane gasoline costs 197 rubles at official gas stations today, while at stations in the neighboring Krasnodar region, it is 73.5 rubles.
We have appealed to the government of the Russian Federation, having previously received support from our Ministry of Energy, to finally establish a subsidized price for gasoline during this period for our gas stations to purchase and subsequently supply to the peninsula. This would significantly ease the situation right now, and then we will continue to deal with the logistical challenges. That is all from me, Vladimir Vladimirovich.
Yes, Alexander Valentinovich Shavlov, please respond to this. Go ahead.
Yes, Vladimirovich, the governor is right that there are no vertically integrated companies there. Historically, there have always been private companies there that handled supply and accordingly their own gas stations for sales. Currently, the resources supplied to Crimea and Sevastopol come from vertically integrated companies because we have no other resources. Fuel producers at oil refineries are exclusively our vertically integrated companies. And due to the complexity of logistics, for obvious reasons, routes and delivery methods have changed. So fuel, of course, now costs more than in other regions, even at cost price. But that is the first factor. The second factor is that due to the shortage, the prices that are forming are higher than the cost. And this is more of a market speculative factor. We are looking into this together with the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service. Overall, if we talk about leveling it to relatively economically justified level in line with other regions, then of course such subsidies are required for the regions, and we are ready to review this situation together with our colleagues from Crimea and Sevastopol.
Yes, let's agree that the wording will be different, not just ready to consider, not just to consider, but to consider and make a decision as quickly as possible. No need to drag it out, all right? Especially since, well, yes, we do have such capabilities, damn it.
In the Yakutsk region, the situation is difficult, but at the same time, it is under control and manageable. We are working in close contact with Alexander Valentinovich, with colleagues from the Ministry of Energy, and with the Rosneft company. As you have already mentioned, we have today concluded a number of contractual agreements between independent oil companies and Rosneft, which allows us to understand what the situation will be like in the future.
Right, but you confirm what I said, right? The interaction between major companies, Rosneft in particular, and the region.
Sergei Yurievich, Igor Ivanovich, and I are in constant contact. Indeed, at a certain stage, he helped us.
Well, I understand, Igor Ivanovich, that you did not expand the gas station network, but increased fuel supplies to the existing stations, right?
Yes. But the fact is that at a certain stage, starting in May, the volumes that were paid for through the exchange were simply suspended. And
understood.
Today, this situation has begun to improve.
On average, the subsidy we are requesting from the government is around 85 rubles per liter of fuel, give or take.
We must, of course, ensure it. Thank you very much. We must, of course, meet the needs of government agencies, law enforcement and security services. That is obvious. And keeping in mind that citizens should not feel any significant burden, a decision on subsidies should be made as quickly as possible. Alexander Valentinovich, please work this out with the Ministry of Finance if any support from my side is needed, although I think that the Ministry of Finance understands everything as well. These are temporary matters. These are completely obvious things also related to actions to disrupt the vacation season, the vacations of our citizens in the south of the country, including in Crimea, but actions to support the people who live there and those who came for a vacation must be carried out now, not sometime later. We need to make these decisions as quickly as possible, calculate them together with colleagues from the region, and make a decision. It is absolutely clear that the enemy aims to damage the economy, but most importantly, they aim to create a nervous atmosphere in society. We understand that this task is impossible. The safety margin of Russia's power system is very high, one of the highest in the world. We just need to organize the work with vertically integrated companies, reach agreements faster so that they do not hoard the product exclusively within their own distribution network, within their gas stations, but would supply the necessary products to independent gas stations. Yes, and Kobzev's proposal should also be considered, and we must expand the opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses to produce petroleum products as quickly as possible. Do everything possible to ensure that everything functions normally for us. As the Minister of Agriculture reports to me, there are no supply problems in the agricultural sector at this time. Everything there is provided for, and I hope it stays that way. I ask you to make decisions promptly and Alexander Valentinovich and the Minister of Transport. So you must report to me and the Prime Minister on an ongoing basis, of course.